Counters allow you to store numeric variable data across your Instant app. The most basic example of a counter is display data, such as a level, score, or currency. In our box unit, we'll be counting the number of times a user taps on the gesture region. The box will move to a different state, depending on how many times the user taps, which is what we call a conditional. For this unit, we will create a counter to track how many times a user taps on the red button. In addition to our transitional and return transitional scenes, we have 3 looping scenes for if the user taps the button twice, less than twice, or more than twice. We've also set up a scene called counter increase, which is a logic-only scene that will calculate the tap interactions. We'll begin this unit by adding a transition from the trans scene to our less than loop scene. Now we're going to set up our counter. This should be your first step anytime you're creating a new counter. To do so, we'll click on the Add an Action drop-down menu in the Events and Actions panel and select Set Counter. In the Counter drop-down menu, we'll click on New Counter, and we'll go ahead and name our counter. Next, we'll need to add our gesture area to the canvas in our looping scenes. We'll click and drag the Go to Scene gesture over the red button and resize as necessary. Remember to name your gesture to keep track of it in the Layers panel. We'll select the logic-only scene as the scene that the gesture should transition to. This means that every time the user performs the gesture, the logic scene will perform the counter action. We'll repeat these steps for our other 2 looping scenes by selecting Show All in the Layers panel and making the counter increase gesture visible. Now we'll go over to our counter increase scene, which will serve as our logic only scene. We'll go to the Properties panel and make sure Logic Only is checked off. Remember that this is a back-end scene that we will not see in our unit playthrough, so it won't have any media added. Now we'll go to our Add an Action menu and select Add Value to Counter. We'll select the counter we created earlier as our counter. We'll leave the operation as Add and set the value to 1. This action will add 1 every time the counter button is pressed. Now we'll add a transition to our less than loop scene. From here, we'll add a conditional by clicking on the C icon next to the transition action. A conditional is if-then logic for the user's interactions. We'll click the plus sign next to the counter conditional section. We're going to choose our previously created counter as the counter and select counter less than as the conditional and change the value to 2. Setting up this conditional means that if the user interacts with the gesture less than 2 times, the scene will return to the counter less than scene. After we've set that up, we'll exit the conditional panel and add another transition, this time to the equal scene. We'll add another conditional with the value 2. This conditional means that if the user interacts with the gesture exactly 2 times, the scene will transition to the counter equal scene. We'll exit the panel and add one last transition, this time to the counter greater than scene. We'll add another counter conditional to this transition using the counter greater than conditional and the value of 2. If the user presses the counter button more than 2 times, they'll be taken to the counter greater than scene. So our last step in this unit will be to add a transition from our return scene back to our AO Box home scene. Now that we've constructed some basic counters, let's take a look at our unit once again.